Welcome back to my channel, Go Element Auto Works. So this is an issue that I was having with my 2007 Mercedes S550. I didn't want to really acknowledge it because I noticed this probably about a year or two ago, and I just kind of like, well, I did a little research and I just said I'll get around to it. Well, I'm getting around to it now. So this is my overflow or the expansion tank for my coolant. This is on the passenger side of the engine compartment on my 2007 Mercedes S550 4MATIC. I don't even want to acknowledge this again, but I have to. I took the radiator cap off, or the overflow tank, right? There you go. What is that foam stuff? What is that foam stuff? That's what happens when coolant and oil mixes. Why do I have coolant and oil both inside the overflow? This is where you put your coolant and it goes to your radiator and it does what it's supposed to do. But somehow and for some reason there is oil inside of my overflow tank. How bad is it? Well, the first time I saw this about 2 years ago, it was just a skim thin layer across. Is it the same? I'm gonna take this tissue right here and stick it in there and see how bad it is. Oh my gosh, look at that. That's bad. That is bad. Very bad. Very, very bad. It's all creamy. And that's not the creamy that you want to see. You never want to see that. From my research, and this is again probably about 2 years ago, it has something to do with the oil cooler mixing, I think, with the coolant lines that run through that. I think it's the oil cooler or some part, maybe some chamber in the radiator where coolant goes through it as well as oil. It's mixing. And where is it mixing? In the overflow tank. Yeah. What will it eventually do? It will be circulated through the engine, just as coolant is circulated through the engine to cool the engine down. And eventually it will ruin those lines or those through the engine. What do you call those things? The channels, I guess, that it travels through the motor. It will eventually ruin that because oil does not belong where coolant is designed to flow. So that will cause major issues. At this point, I have to stop driving this car until I get this remedied, right? I have to figure this out. I cannot continue to drive this car with this issue. It's going to ruin a perfectly good running car. This is bullcrap. It's bad now. I didn't realize it was gonna be this bad, man. I expected maybe a little bit, but this is bad. That's bad. So I'll have to remove this first of all and drain it and clean it out and see how bad it is. If this thing is full of that, because right now this is the upper part, it goes deeper down there. I gotta see how thick of a foam layer there is in this. Obviously, all this right here is filled with the oil and coolant mixture. Dang, man, that's jacked up. I don't know if these go out. I'm sorry, if these are input or output lines. I can't remember. I think there is. Okay, so the bottom down there, there's a bottom down there that has, okay, there's a line right there, a larger line, and that obviously is what feeds the radiator, right? Just gravity, you know, so that if there's none left in here, but a little bit down there, you still have coolant in your system. The motor hasn't started to overheat, so I know it's not at that point, right? I never had an overheating issue. Oh, but it's coming. So I have to drain this, see how bad it is. Dang, bro. Because in all reality, I should replace everything where that coolant flows outside of the engine. That's the radiator. I can't remember what all is involved with this coolant system. Is it just the radiator? Is there another type of coolant thing in here that I don't know. So let me just stop right there because I'm not sure. Now this is the same radiator I think that is in the GL550, if I'm not correct. I have to double check. I changed the radiator in that, so it's the same thing, but it was very tight, very hard to do. And you would think it would have been easier, how big that, you know, being how big that SUV is. This thing right here is going to be tough because I got to remove the fan, and there's not much space between the fan and all the pulleys. It's tight. Anywhere where this coolant flows, the hoses, I either have to clean and replace those. But you see what I'm dealing with here. This is jacked up. It's a poor design. From what I read, it's not so rare that this happens. I definitely recommend you all checking your overflow or expansion tank, your coolant expansion tank. Check that. Make sure you don't have any of this oil mixing in there. That is bad. God, man. Look at this. Gosh. See, before you had like an oil layer and then the rest of it was coolant. But again, that's 2 years ago. 2 years of driving this mug. It hasn't gotten any better. It's only gotten worse. Well, you see what I have to do now. I got another project. This is part of Mercedes ownership, I tell you. Part of Mercedes ownership. Now I can take this to Mercedes and let them stroke me, or I can do it myself, and you know what I'm gonna do. So I'm sure I'll be making a video about that, replacing this radiator. And again, once I get up in there, I'll see what else I need to replace. But as of right now, me not doing any research, me not remembering at this time, I'm only thinking the radiator, but nothing's ever that simple, right? It's always gonna be more involved, so I'll keep you posted. This is disgusting. Go Element Auto Works. Peace out. Like, share, and subscribe. Talk to you later. Bye. All right, so I kind of just jumped in this and I didn't start recording until just now. So I've already removed this component right here. This connects. The hose is coming from the radiator. This is like in between the thermostat. Let me get this right. If that's the thermostat, then this is the, I don't know what you call this, but it's the joint in between the thermostat and the radiator. It's metal. You gotta remove that. The hose off of here, here, and there. That's this hose right here, the small one, this one, and this one. Is that the thermostat? I don't know what it is. I think it is. Yeah, I already replaced that once. That's right. It's a common issue on this motor. It's a common issue on a couple of these Mercedes, but the newer years beyond the early 2000 range, I think their V6 and also their V8, the thermostats need to be replaced every so often. They usually stick open, not closed. But I replaced that before already. Typically, the indicator that thermostat need replaced is you get a check engine light, and the cause is, well, it says that the engine didn't reach up to temperature or something like that at like a predetermined time. The motor stays kind of cool. When it runs cool, usually that's open the whole time instead of allowing the engine to warm up and then open up. All right, so I've removed that. We took these out right here, these locking pins right here, which connect the larger hose to this. And that smaller tube right here, that smaller hose right here, just has one of these squeeze pins right there, or clamps rather. All right, so you see here that there is some oil right there that's visible. There's some oil in there too if you shine the light on it. Let me see. Oh man, come on. You can see it. It's hard to see, but there's a little bit of floaties right there. It looks like it's gelled in this camera, but it's not. It's just a little bit of oil that's floating across the top. So there is oil in the coolant system. And I believe the cause is this right here. You can see there's a lot of oil seepage here, which means that gasket is compromised. That's done. It needs to be replaced. You can see it all around it, more or less in the front and top. You also will have oil seepage from this right here. That O-ring or gasket, whatever. Typically, you need to make sure that is always new. When you do oil change, check that. But this right here, I believe, is the culprit. So, whatever I have to remove to get access to these bolts to keep this on here. I think you have 2 at the top, probably 2 at the bottom. I don't know for sure. I have to look at that. But I think I have to remove this in order to get access to the ones on the bottom. So I'll be leaking some fluid up out of here. You see it's already some coming out from removing the hose. There's gonna be more coming out once I take this off. This is the reservoir for the power steering fluid. So if I can contain as much of that as possible, I will. I wish I can get access to these bolts down here without having to remove this, but whatever. Okay, so this is where we're at so far. I have removed a lot of the lines, a lot of the hoses, and I have this right here, overflow reservoir pulled out. Take a look at it, it's pretty disgusting on the inside. What worries me is that as the line started to empty out, as the coolant started to empty out, as I was removing other lines, it caused that to drain. And when that drained, it caused a lot of that oil and coolant mixture to flow out of the bottom hose into the bottom of the radiator, or wherever the connection is at on the passenger side of the radiator. And so I'll definitely have to flush it, but I'm wondering if I'm going to have to just replace this radiator. You see, either this chamber, maybe in the radiator, where there's another option. There's another possibility. It could be, the worst case scenario could be transmission fluid and the coolant is mixing on the passenger side of the radiator, where it flows in and flows out. You don't want that. You don't want it to be transmission fluid. So that's a possibility, right? I've seen that on some forums, them talking about that. But more than likely, the oil cooler or the radiator where the oil and the coolant is mixing is causing a problem. So it's either in the radiator or it's in the oil cooler, which is this thing right here. The bad thing about that is it's hard to access all the screws. These bolts right here, these screws right here that have to come out, these bolts. There's like 2 at the bottom. I think there's 1 over here on the side in the middle point. It's hard to get access to these bolts. You have to remove this right here. This is the power steering reservoir, the fluid reservoir. This has to be removed in order to get access to those bolts down at the bottom. And I removed one of the bolts here, this one, but there's another one down below here that I had to remove, and it's still tight. So I'm going to have to go online and see how to remove that. I'm trying to, do it off of just, hands-on experience, and well, the 2 bolts that I removed is not enough. Also, I know that there should be maybe a locking pin, like some type of clamp or locking, C clamp or whatever that thing is called, locking the C-shaped thing that you pull out. That should probably E-clipper. I forgot what they're called, but it probably is some type of clip that connects that to the actual power steering pump. And whatever it is that's holding it in place has to be removed to separate that, right? So I don't know. If it is the oil cooler, then we know that that's the issue and the gasket has to be replaced, which I have, but it's just a matter of getting this thing removed. There's still, like I said, 2 lower bolts and 1 on the side here, about midway down towards the engine, that has to be removed, and it's hard to get access to that. Now, I don't want to proceed forward and remove this if it's the radiator. Now, I know that I have oil right here, oil seepage. Now, they said that the gasket right here, this O-ring on this right here, which is the oil filter, that oftentimes will go bad and cause that, like seepage. Or is this seepage from this gasket that's in here? Or is it a combination of both? More than likely it's both. These are all things you have to be aware of when maintaining these engines, these 5.4 liters or 5.5 liters, whatever you want to call it, but it's in the S550. Things you have to be aware of. So I am still diagnosing or narrowing down the issue, where the issue is. I'm locating these specific issues so that I can only do the repairs that are necessary. I mean, I know I should replace this gasket, so that really has to be done regardless. I changed the oil in this a while back. I probably do need to do a fresh oil change. It's probably recommended anyways, because I can't remember when the last oil change was. Too many cars, you had that issue, man. Anyway, so I have to give that some attention. The biggest thing I need to realize, though, I need to come to terms with is, do I need to replace my radiator? If so, I got to remove this fan. I probably have to remove this piece right here so that I can pull it all up, or else I don't know if I have enough space to back it towards the engine and pull it up. I probably have to remove this right here, which requires this and this and this, nothing, and anything that's holding this front radiator cover. I don't know what you would call this plate right here, but Mercedes often uses this, I think, on all their vehicles. This is able to be disassembled or removed to gain access to that radiator. You don't have to remove the front bumper, just all this stuff that's in place, that's in the way. Shoot. Half of the lines have already been removed. See here, you gotta remove those pins. I don't know. This is just kind of learning as I go. I need to stop and just do some research real quick and stop learning the hard way so that I can avoid mistakes. I always encourage research. Do your due diligence, read the forums, go on YouTube, whatever you need to do so that you don't make the same mistake somebody else made. You can save a lot of time and a lot of headaches. So I think at this point I need to stop and do that. Also, research the most common issues, the most common things that are causing coolant and oil to mix in the overflow reservoir. What are the common problems, issues, what happens most of the time that causes this issue? I'm slurring my words a little bit because I'm tired. I just got off of work. I'm coming back home to this. I took a little break. I know something I need to do because I have a project coming into the garage and this car is in the way. So I need to finish this right here. I'm not going to pull this out and leave this out. I need to get both of these vehicles actually out of here at some point to bring another one in, and I'll be pulling this one in and out as I'm doing it. What it is a coilover suspension swap. Silver's Neomax going on a SL500. This is a customer's car. So looking forward to doing that, but I need to get this out the way because that coilover suspension should arrive within another week or so, a few weeks. So I need to get this out the way and get this done. I picked up some other cars. I have a Maxima that's on the way. So I'm still doing my thing regarding, getting to it. You can define that if you want to, but you know what it is. So this one right here has been really good to me. I've been driving this every day, man. Just going through it, driving it, fixing little things here and there. I need to put some wheels on this. Somebody wants to buy it from me before I really, put some more money into it. But I don't know. I don't know if I should sell it or when I should sell it. I like it. All right, so that's the story behind this one, man. I'm going in, like I said, do some studying, do some research, and see what it is that I need to do in order to fix this issue. And I don't want it to happen again. Failed radiators often happens. They break down. They're just plastic. A lot of heat goes through that. And you know what heat does to plastic? It deteriorates it. As I'm up in this engine compartment, as I'm moving things and touching things, some things are just falling apart. Just over time, man. It's a lot of heat that comes off of here. A lot of materials that Mercedes have like introduced into their designs are not as solid as some other prior designs and materials. For instance, I can look at this right here. This is brittle. This falls apart in my hand. This is just for like the drain plug for the top right here, as water gets inside the flows in there, it has to have a means of escape, and so this kind of directs it. But this is rubber, it's falling apart. You know, it's supposed to run it right down into there when you close the hood, but it's deteriorating. So these pieces right here will eventually clog up something. So just know that, be aware of that, right? Yeah, whatever. There's some other things that, let me see, even on this right here, let me see, here it goes. On the overflow reservoir right here, this piece right here where the hoses go in at the top, that's all broken up. And as you touch it, it just starts breaking apart even more. So that's brittle. I probably need to just replace this altogether. You know, I plan on cleaning it out and reconnecting these hoses, but I mean, look at that. They're just brittle. So I probably need to do that. I need to start showing this car some love. You know, I stopped driving it as much just because I have other things that I enjoy driving. And this is like a big old 4-door. You know, I call this my boss vehicle, you know, when I got my suit on or whatever, and I feel a certain kind of way, I drive this one more. But lately with COVID and everything, man, this car hasn't seen the road much over the last year plus. I've been enjoying, you know, it's all been really about pulling this out when, you know, it was time to have some fun. The drop top was time to have that kind of fun. And, you know, cars that I don't know, other cars that I'm buying that I'm just like, I enjoy driving just to take heat or time or mileage off of my cars, the wear and tear. I've been driving my truck, you know, we just came from out of town and that. You know, in cars like this, man, I call these sliders. Stuff I pick up, I just been driving around in those, you know, getting to know other cars so that when I sell them, I can, you know, be honest about what it is that it needs. This car right here has just always been like one of my nicer cars, but I kind of like preserving it. But when I came across this issue a few years ago, I was like, okay, I'll give it some attention. You know, I kind of ignored it because I'm like, whatever. It still drives fine. That's just an issue that I just know I need to fix. But as I'm realizing I need to take care of my baby, I'm realizing I need to fix this. It's no longer time to ignore it, but time to fix it. So don't let problems go too long. I definitely discourage that. The only reason why, again, I went this long is because I don't drive this car that much. But if this is your daily or you're driving it very often, you're relying on it, you know, your family's relying on your car being, you know, reliable, your job is dependent on that, then definitely get this stuff fixed, man, as soon as possible. Because with a Mercedes especially, but with any car, if you see a problem and the longer you let it go, the worse it's going to get. And the more expensive it's going to get. And it could cause extreme damage where now you have to replace your motor or a tranny or whatever the case being. You just have to be aware of that. You know, don't ignore a problem, fix it. Don't be like me in this case. Again, it's only because I drive a lot of different cars. This one does not see a lot of road time. But it's time to address the issue. So that's my encouragement. Fix it. If you know there's a problem, just fix it. Just fix it. All right. Well, the more you own, the more problems you're going to have. The more you have to utilize your time and time management and energy and money management. You have to take all that stuff into consideration. So that's what it is. All right, back to the lab. Let me go ahead and do some research, man. And hopefully I can fix this thing sooner than later. And hopefully it won't be as extensive as I think it's going to be. But I'll do an update and let you guys know what I find out. And once it's repaired, you know, I have to go ahead and flush the system, add the coolant, get all the air out. You know, that's an issue that a lot of people have when they are messing or they interrupt the coolant system when they have to refill it. Oftentimes people have air in their system. They'll see their needle go crazy, go up, starts getting hot, then it'll just drop down slightly. So I might make a video on how to get the air out of the system and get everything the way it's supposed to be so that you're driving a safe and reliable car. You don't have to worry about it overheating. So that's always an issue, like I said, whenever that system is compromised. All right, now I'm just rambling. Like I said, I'm tired. Let me go ahead and get in this house and do what I need to do. And until then, I'll talk to you later. All right, peace out. Like, share, and subscribe. I'm out. All right, so I'm back at it. So I watched a YouTube video on how to remove the power steering pump. that allowed me to figure out how to remove the power steering reservoir. I didn't know what to expect. So it's always good to do your research so that you can know at least where bolts and screws are, what to remove in order to do what you're trying to accomplish. So in my case, I needed to remove the power steering reservoir only, not the pump, but just the reservoir. But it's kind of hard if you Google how to remove power steering pump reservoir on a Mercedes S550 W221 chassis. You're not going to really get a whole lot of information. But instead of looking at the immediate issue, look beyond it. What's the most common reason somebody would look up how to remove something on the Mercedes? And in this case, it's the power steering pump itself. So by removing the power steering reservoir, that gave me access to the bolts, or the screws or bolts, whatever you want to call it, that I couldn't see before, that is holding the oil cooler in place. It gave me access now to the lower, on the right-hand side. There is 1, 2, 3 on the right side that has to be removed. Without removing that power steering reservoir, there was no way for me to access them. You can kind of see one down there in the middle. Let me put some light on this joint. Okay. The bottom one down there. Then there's one in the middle, and then there's one up top. Let me see, did I already get these? So there's another one down here. Lower left and the top left. From what I see from here, those are the ones that has to be removed in order to remove the cooler cover. Once I remove that, then I'll have access to the gasket. I'm going to reassemble all that. I'll take some video of me actually, like once it's removed, what I see. Because again, I'm basing it off of the excessive oil buildup right here. I am assuming that it came from the gasket, a failed gasket. I'm assuming also that the oil and the coolant mixture is coming from that source, because it's a common issue. And so I'm just really hoping that that's it. I'm hoping it's not the radiator. Okay, I'm hoping it's not transmission fluid and coolant. I'm hoping that it's not oil and coolant mixing inside the radiator. I'm hoping that one of those chambers that separates the two is not compromised and it's not mixing at that point, because that means I have to replace the radiator. Don't want to do that. Trying to keep this as simple as possible. I need this car back on the road. I have some parts coming in soon, so I'll need this space, okay? All right, so back at it. Okay, so I removed the cover for the oil cooler. So as I had mentioned, on the inside, closer to the firewall side, there were 3 bolts and 2 on the outer. And removal of those with a star, I think it's a T30, a bit, allowed me to separate it. Now, once those are removed, you get a firm grip of it, and you evenly, from the top and bottom, side by side, pull it away from it evenly, and it will separate. Try not to wedge it from the top or from the bottom, but evenly separate it. So it shows here the gasket. It exposes the gasket. You can see the wear of the gasket. You can even see the cream where the coolant and likely oil is mixing. Now, is this the point of mix where it is mixing, or is it the radiator? I don't know yet. I'm looking at the part where the oil runs through, and it's worn down pretty well. But it's hard to just look at this and see, like, okay, this is where they're mixing. Because if the oil and coolant is mixing here, then at one of these points is the out and the in for the coolant and the oil, and I'm not sure where. I'll look that up and just see if I can follow a pattern or a pathway that it flows. That would help me to kind of determine if this is the cause of my problem. I have to find out what is the purpose of the oil cooler, and again, what is the direction of the flow. So definitely this gasket is worn down. You can see there. It needs to be replaced anyways. So if nothing else, this is preventative maintenance, but likely and hopefully this is the cause of my coolant and my oil mixing. We'll see. So I have a fresh gasket. I think my doors are locked. Let me see. That's locked. Anyways, I left it inside the car just to protect it, but the gasket is inside there, the new one. And so I know that you have to remove this, and don't use anything metal. Just try to clean it up as much as possible without getting debris or the particles from the broken down gasket into the chambers. Make sure it's all cleaned up. Same thing with this. Make sure that's cleaned up. Make sure you wipe it clean so that it's a good adhesion, and make sure that you evenly tighten it up. You don't just over tighten one bolt. You do them in a systematic pattern, top, down, you know, along the sides, like in a circle, or you can do it in a, like with a wheel, you would do it in like a star pattern to evenly apply the wheel to the hub. In the same manner, you don't want to over tighten either one of these. You want to do it in a pattern, maybe top left, bottom right, top right, bottom left, whatever the case being. You know, there's 5 bolts, so just figure that part out. But just make sure you do them a little bit at a time, tighten them up a little bit at a time. Don't over tighten one, but do them in a systematic approach. All right, so I'm going to do that. I'm not going to record myself cleaning that up because I want to really focus and make sure that I don't, like I said, lose any particles or make a mess or scratch or do any damage, so that the new gasket fits in there perfect, and it will eliminate that problem. All right, so let's get to work. All right, so we have here the gasket removed and the gasket replaced. Take a look at the old gasket. It's done. It served its time. This is the OEM original Mercedes gasket that was in place. You see what ports or what chambers had the oil versus the coolant. You see what the heat and the oil eventually does to the gasket. It wears it down, it breaks it down. It's just what it is. When you have all that coolant, you have all that oil and heat that's radiating, and the conductive heat from the engine, you know, it does what it does, man. It just breaks down gaskets over time. Nothing lasts forever. They harden and they become less pliable. I know right now the darker one, the oil side, is hard, very firm, very hard, while the coolant side is very soft and flexible. Whereas darker is very hard. And oftentimes that is where it breaks down, because the gasket has lost its flexibility and its capability of filling the void properly and evenly. So that's the first part to become compromised. It hardens and no longer is pliable as it should be to serve its purpose. All right, so before I replaced it with the new one, I cleaned out where the gasket belongs. There will be old rubber contaminants or pieces of the old gasket that are stuck in there. They will become contaminants because they will prevent the proper adhesion of the gasket to the metal backing and also the metal plate, the front of it. All right, so make sure you clean that off. Now, the removal of it, depending on where you try to apply, can appear to be difficult. I used a plastic pick. It was so hard not to use my metal screwdriver, because I use this thing for everything, it seems like. Now I could easily just stick this in there and pry it right out, but at the same time, I'll scratch the metal behind it. That's a no-no. Because now the gasket won't fit. I mean, there'll be a leak, a potential leak. The gasket is designed to go on a smooth metal surface. It will no longer be smooth and even if you scratch it with a screwdriver. So if you try that, you are risking damaging the very thing that you're repairing. So try to use your plastic pick. Now, being that I just said that part of this gasket is firm and part of it is very pliable, I suggest that you go with the more firm side, because it'll allow you to get a better grip and it will all move. That portion or that section will move evenly, versus the rubber side, it tends to want to tear and flex. And that makes you want it. It made me want to go back to the metal screwdriver and just do it real nice and easy, real quick. But stick with this. Do not scratch your oil cooler where the gasket goes. Do not do it. Do not do it. Find something plastic, something firm, something stiff, something narrow enough to go in there and pry it out. All right. So I cleaned up that after I got finished getting rid of the old gasket. I cleaned it with a carb cleaner. So I used this right here. It doesn't matter what brand, just make sure it's a carb cleaner. And what I did was I sprayed it downward. All right, I use gravity to my advantage. Don't spray into the ports. Do not spray into those ports. Spray down along the channel where the gasket goes. Wipe it out. I use a lot of paper towels. I use clean paper towels over and over again. Make sure you get all that up out of there. All those contaminants, all those little particles. You're going to get grease and grime from the exterior as you're wiping. Make sure you're trying to wipe, again, in a downward motion, a controlled motion, so that you're not adding contaminants, debris, and dirt and grime into your chamber or your channel where your gasket goes. All right, it's a lot of work to do to just mess up at this point. Just make sure you do it right. I wear gloves for the most part, but then once I put the gasket in there, I took my gloves off because my gloves were dirty. And I wanted to make sure I had that touch. I knew what I was doing. I was aware of where I was placing it. I didn't play around with it a lot. I put it in place. It's done. Again, this right here, make sure this is clean. This is the part this is the front of the oil cooler. Make sure that's clean. You're gonna get some staining because it is aluminum and chemical and heat and all that kind of stuff, cooling and heating. It's excessive heat coming off of this engine, a lot of conductive heat. So you're gonna get some wear and tear that you just have to deal with. But that right there is still in great shape, good enough to put back and have a tight seal. The surface is not compromised. It's lost some of its color, and it has a groove from where the gasket was at. But that's aluminum. You're going to get that. It'll still create a good seal. All right. And so that's why it's important when you separate it, you don't stick something down there and pry it out. You'll scratch this up and mess it all up. Then you have to get it resurfaced, and you'll probably mess up the. You'll probably get some metal shavings in there if you try to do that, and then you mess up the whole purpose of this oil cooler. Now it's all contaminated. Last thing you want to do. So just use some common sense. Know what this component is, know why it works, why it's here, its purpose, like I said, and make sure that you just take care and carefully take it apart, carefully replace the gasket, carefully put it back together. All right, so I'm about to go ahead and put that back on there. Clean up, like I said, what you can while you're here. But now this is the reverse process, putting everything back together. And like I said, when you tighten it up with the screws, make sure you do it in a systematic method so that you don't over tighten one, but tighten them evenly, as close to the same time as possible, so that it collapses onto the gasket. It flattens the gasket, creates a tight seal, an even seal, and you're good to go. After that, I'll put the last thing I took off before that was the power steering reservoir, and that's gonna be tough. Removing that pin, there's a pin, let me show you. This right here is your locking C-clip. That goes in between the oil, the power steering fluid reservoir and the power steering pump, right there. Right there. That's very hard to get access to. Very hard to get access to. So that's gonna be a little bit kind of difficult to reach back in there up underneath, kind of blindly popping that back in place. But that was probably the hardest thing, just to remove that C-clip. For me, it was. Everything else is pretty much easy, rudimentary. Is that right? Rudimentary, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. Basic, simple, whatever. Not complicated. So just go throughout the process. You did everything to get to this point, just reverse it. Pay attention, like I said, keep it clean, keep it simple. Then I got to flush the system. Then I got to reattach all the hoses and all that crap. And hopefully I fix the problem. So I think this is it. Like I said, all the research I've done has pointed to this issue. It's a common issue. So, all right, we'll get it together. Okay, so I did go ahead and clean it up some more. I decided to use a real fine steel wool that I use when I do body work. You can buy this at automotive stores. It's very, very, very fine. It's a very fine steel wool. It will not damage the surface. What I did was I sprayed the actual steel wool with a little bit of that carb cleaner, and just real small. I paid close attention to the oil, the burnt oil that was stuck on that was stuck on here. So I cleaned that up. I went ahead and cleaned that up, made it nice. All right, so I don't feel anything with my nails other than the natural grooves that I think probably already come in this right here. There's almost like a diagram that the gasket actually sits in. Very, 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 very thin, barely below the surface. I'm going to assume that came that way. All right, that it was engraved in there. But all that oil that was stuck on there, I mean, it was really unnecessary to leave that on there, but just because you want this thing as clean as possible. And so I didn't do it dry. I did it, like I said, by using the carb cleaner and the steel wool combined. Cleaned that up, wiped it off, and that was good to go. Make sure you protect the ports. Make sure you don't allow anything in there. Before I did what I just did, I saw something black in there, and there actually was a piece of the plastic, I mean the rubber gasket. Yeah, I actually saw the rubber gasket, a piece of it, probably like an inch long, that was in one of these little chambers. So one of these little ports. So make sure you clean it up. Make sure you inspect it before you reassemble it. Make sure that you don't have any pieces of rubber floating around in there. Make sure it's cleaned up. When you remove this from the car, you will get a little bit of oil seeping out. You will get a little bit of coolant seeping out. Just that's what it is. This is like a mini radiator, right? It flows in here. There's fins in there. This is aluminum. It is designed to cool the oil. All right, back to it. Hey guys, check this out. So this is the hose that feeds into the overflow reservoir. It comes from the top of the motor. I'm sorry, top of the radiator. Let me see if I can show you. Let me get my flashlight. Hold on one second. Where'd my flashlight go? There it goes. Okay. Let me show you guys. This hose right here comes from, we'll do it so that this camera doesn't go upside down. Where you at? Right there. All right, this is the top passenger side of the radiator. That hose goes into the overflow reservoir. Let me show you where. This right here on my left side. You can see the oil mixture. That's the hose that is feeding into this reservoir. It's coming from the top passenger side of the radiator. All right? It's clogged. Well, it obviously flows, but it's very hard for it to flow. How do I know? Well, first off, look inside of there. If I can get it to zoom to, there it goes. All right, focus, I mean. All right, so this is the hose that's feeding that nasty crud into my overflow. Now watch this. Don't try this at home. I'm gonna blow into it, and I'm also have it pointing to me so you can see. I can't do that, can I? Okay, hold on. I'm pushing so hard. I'm blowing so hard, and I could not get it to really blow out. I mean, it shouldn't be that much resistance. I'm blowing hard, my cheeks hurt, and this is all I was able to do. Just get a little bit of flow, not enough to push the fluid out like it's supposed to. So it's clogged up. I need to replace this thing. I'm gonna try to clean it out first, but that stuff is obviously clogged up in here. So that's gonna be a problem. Anything that inhibits the proper flow of your cooling system, that's a problem. See, once you start taking stuff apart, you start discovering things. And that's important. That's important to know. That's important to know that this hose is clogged up. Now, if you look on this end, you know, it looks clean. But this end, you have all that stuff. The mixture of the oil and the coolant. So, got to figure that one out. It's best to replace the hose, but so just knowing that, if this is clogged, so imagine what could be going on inside the radiator. Gosh, I don't want to fix that. I do not want to replace the radiator. I'm hoping that what I did was enough and I just need to clean this out. All right. Let's hope that the majority of the buildup is in the reservoir and the hose that feeds it. Let's just hope that that's what's going on. All right, back to what I was doing. Everything is put back in place. Well, this is. It was so hard to get that C-clip back in there. Oh, it was hard. It was hard. I had to use a screwdriver and leverage to pop it back into place. But I got it. All right, I got it. It's hot out here. It's 91 degrees out here in Cincinnati. I'm sweating like a pig. Pigs don't sweat. That's the irony. That's kind of, anyways. All right. Okay. All right. I'll get back. Okay. So just to let everyone know that this hose right here was severely clogged. I started to blow it out, and this is what was coming out. It was like baby poop. Real thick. Real thick. Then, let me see, I used like a zip tie to run it up in there to break some of it up. And then I just pushed hot water through here, and a whole lot of it came out. And I repeated that cycle over and over again. I also put in some of this carb choke cleaner to help break a lot of it up. Be careful with that. When you spray that stuff inside the tube and close off both ends and you shake it around, it builds up pressure. It will shoot out, so protect your eyes. I'm doing a whole lot just to preserve this hose, just because I'm not really trying to order something and wait for it to come. I need to get this car out of here. I need to fix it. So doing that process, running hot water through it, using this right here, using a long zip tie just as I would. I used this one initially, then I grabbed a longer one, but just as you would if you had clogged plumbing in your house, right? Run it up in there, twist it around, break the stuff up, and apply some pressure, and try to get it cleaned out, man. Again, this is coming out the top passenger side of the radiator. And this is what feeds into the overflow reservoir. So do what you got to do. If you want to save it, clean it out well. Once this thing gets hot to operating temperature anyways, that coolant, the rest of it that I didn't get, which isn't much because I really went hard on cleaning this thing out. Whatever is left over in there, it will come out into the overflow. Whatever's in the radiator, it will come out to the overflow. So, do what you got to do, solve the initial problem, and then get the system flushed out. And I might have to change my coolant again, just to make sure that I get all the stuff out of there, all the oil out of there. But it is what it is. Like I said, don't let your stuff go on this long. If you have an issue, just fix it. Don't postpone the problem, especially with Mercedes. It only gets worse and more expensive. All right, so don't be cheap. Fix your problem. Okay, everyone, so in conclusion, I finished the project. My oil cooler has a new gasket. Everything is back in place. All my hoses are reconnected. I have been going through the process of making sure I get all the air out of my system because I had to add an excessive amount of coolant. So my levels are good. I've had to get all the air out. And sometimes it takes, days to really get all the air out. Let me see something. Because, you're going to have air trapped at the thermostat all throughout the system. Mostly outside the motor, but any air that enters into the system, because it's a closed system, it has to escape. And so it will do so as it, as the pressure increases, as the coolant expands. You need to really watch it, make sure it doesn't overheat, go back and forth, look at the gauge. It should start to raise, and then it should drop as the thermostat opens up. And when it does that, there's going to be a whole lot of air that starts coming out of here, out the overflow. It's going to bubble up. It's going to pour out. It's going to overflow. Then you turn the car off. It'll drop excessively, it'll empty out. Fill it back up again. Let it idle. Drive it. Let it idle. Drive it. Turn it off. Turn it on. You have to go through the process. It even helps if you're at an elevated, if you're parked on a elevation, kind of like an incline, so that the front end is elevated higher than the rear. Make sure you do that also. That also helps. It can take a day. It can take 2 days. I remember when I did the radiator on my wife's GL550, a week down the road, maybe even 2 weeks, I got the low coolant light. And it was because there was more air that was just gradually escaping over time. And so it dropped the volume and overflow. So you'll get that. But just watch it. Always watch your gauge after you do such an extensive repair, or anytime you open up the system. Make sure you do that. Now at this time, my engine is dirty, it's filthy, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and clean that up. But yeah, I finished this all up last night. So this video is a continuation of yesterday, where like I said, I started putting everything back together, getting the coolant in there, cycling it, watching it. It's time consuming, but it's worth it. You just want to make sure that you don't do any damage. Make sure everything is tight. Make sure you don't have any leaks. You will have a excessive amount of coolant leaking from up underneath. And in my case, also, I had some power steering fluid that was leaking out. Kind of messed up my driveway a little bit. But it's all part of the process. It's all part of the process. So I'm good to go now. It's going, again, I'm going to watch it over the next few days, the next few weeks. Just make sure I don't have any leaks, make sure all my hoses are tight and right, and make sure my fluid levels are right. So that's how you do it, guys. That's how you do it. Also, a little tip. The type of coolant that I used is not Mercedes, not Pitocin. It's actually this. This is good coolant right here. This is 100% concentrated. They also have a 50-50 mix, but I don't use that. But I've read the forums. This right here is perfectly acceptable for Mercedes-Benz. I've used this for years, and it's very good. Always break it down or whatever with a 50-50 ratio. Make sure you don't use all. For the price, it's better to use a concentrated because the 50-50 is only like $2 less. But think about it. You're getting half the amount of coolant. You can get your own water, and you mix that, Make sure you just do a 50-50 mix. So for $2 more, you get twice as much. Come on, man, do the math. Water's cheap. Buy the proper water from the store. It's like $2 or something like that. Maybe even $1 for a gallon of the water that you're supposed to mix with coolant. So it's simple, man. Just use some common sense. Also, for the fluid, though, for the power steering fluid, I did use the Pitocin, though. I could have got the Mercedes power steering fluid for cheaper. But this is like, what is it? Yesterday was 4th of July. Nothing was open. I couldn't get access to it. I wanted to finish this job. So I paid 2 times as much as I should have paid for power steering fluid. I could have got the Mercedes-Benz power steering fluid. It would have been a lot less, but whatever. Sometimes convenience is worth the extra money. The inconvenience, you don't want to deal with. I didn't want to wait till Tuesday when everything opens back up. It might be open today. Today is Monday. It might be open. I don't know. But I wanted this job to be complete. I didn't want to start my my car with low power steering fluid. It's not necessary. I wanted to get this thing out of the garage, so I did what I had to do. So anyways, I'm over explaining. I'm about to clean this engine up, man. This is disgusting. Now that I got that problem resolved, I'm gonna go ahead and clean this thing up and so it presents the way it's supposed to present. It's a Mercedes, don't forget. It's a pretty Mercedes. It's a dirty Mercedes, but it's a Mercedes. You might be wondering why I have this Nissan Altima here. Well, you know what I do. I make it happen. So this right here it's gonna help pay some bills, but I keep it moving. Y'all go ahead and continue to like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate the attention. I appreciate everything that you all contribute to the channel, your advice, your tips. Please continue to do so. Please continue to help me to grow. The more you know, the more you grow, right? Again, appreciate you guys' support. Stay in touch. Talk to you later. Peace out.